the evidence shows that abusive environments and discriminatory environments have worse productivity, higher staff turnover. It's bad for business not to take action.
But just give our listeners some practical examples of how employers can prevent sexual harassment. Is this things like banning nights out or booze in the office? How do you practically go about this?
Um, well, I think, the starting point is we all agree that women, that everyone should be safe at work and that employers shouldn't be exposing their staff to unnecessary risk. And there are lots of reasonable steps that employers can take that are not about stopping people going out or having a nice time. It's things like having in place a policy about preventing sexual harassment and communicating it. It's being clear that there will be zero tolerance to sexual harassment, having really clear routes for people to report harassment, making sure staff are properly trained about what it is and how to respond when a complaint is raised, and responding to complaints properly, and then being transparent where there are cases of harassment that are upheld, being transparent about what's happened, the steps have been taken. That's important in communicating that this will be taken seriously. This piece of legislation will be a really important step forward, because what it does, exactly as you're saying, Aisha, is it shifts from that kind of reactive response to sexual harassment when it happens to a new culture where we say, let's do what we can. There are lots of things that are perfectly manageable and reasonable that stop harassment happening. And it switches that responsibility from an employee to raise a claim and potentially take it through an employment tribunal to an employer to create a positive culture. And we know that that is obviously good for women in those workplaces, but actually it's also good for business because the evidence shows that abusive environments and discriminatory environments have worse productivity, higher staff turnover. It's bad for business not to take action.
And on that point, I mean, what I thought was very interesting about this as well is this third party duty. So, for example, if you're a landlord, you can't turn a blind eye to your bar staff, your female or indeed male bar staff getting, harassed by patrons. But how do you think pubs, for example, can actually do that? We've just had somebody on from UK Hospitality basically saying that lots of pubs and restaurants and businesses, small businesses in hospitality are absolutely on their knees post-COVID, now with the energy crisis and this cost of living crisis and interest rates and inflation crisis. How can they realistically take on additional measures like this when they're really, really struggling?
So these really are the kind of measures that you would expect any decent workplace to have in place. So all it's saying is take reasonable steps to prevent. That doesn't mean that you're always going to be able to prevent every instance. But let's imagine, for instance, that you have a customer who's repeatedly harassing someone. It's not reasonable to ask someone working behind the bar to continue to serve that person and continue to experience harassment. You need to make alternative arrangements, whether that is that person being barred or someone else, perhaps a male employee who's not experienced harassment, serving them instead. And, I think it is important for employers, who might be feeling they're under pressure, but you can't kind of rebuild your business on the basis of exploitation of women that work for you. Over half of women who work in hospitality have experienced sexual harassment. That's just not acceptable. None of us kind of want to have an industry or a sector that has that kind of prevalence.
And I mean, and it was interesting. I remember hearing a really interesting story a couple of months ago, actually, about I can't remember the name of the publican, but they were basically saying they want to actually make a lot of pubs more women friendly. They do want to actually change the vibe in a lot of pubs because it's actually better for business. They want more, obviously they want their women staff to feel better, but they also actually want more female customers to come in as well. Jemima, final question to you. It's past its second reading. Do you think this law will actually make it onto the statute book? Is there cross-party support for it? Does the government support it?
Yeah, we're really hopeful. This is something Fawcett and others have been campaigning for many years, and then Vera Hobhouse has done a fantastic job taking it through as a private member's bill. But it has had cross-party support. This is something that was in the government's last election manifesto. Then, due to reasons of parliamentary timetabling, they weren't able to take it forward in a bill, unfortunately, of their own. So there's every reason to believe that this is a change that we can achieve. And I'm really hopeful for that as a really important moment, and just being very clear about what our expectations are for women in the workplace.